The guns roared in the distance as dawn broke over the small French commune of Carentan on the morning of June 6, 1944. Smoke billowed against the pale sky, shrouding the landscape in a heavy, acrid fog. Sergeant John Sullivan crouched behind the jagged remains of a stone wall, his heart pounding in his chest as the rumble of the earth shook beneath him, every cannon blast resonating like thunder. The D-Day invasion had started, and the stakes could not be higher. He could hear the cries of men, the clanging of metal, and the chilling sounds of nearby combatants, realizing that this was the moment they had been waiting for, one filled with both hope and dread. John was a man forged in the coastal town of Cape May, New Jersey, a place where the sun kissed the sea and the waves whispered secrets to anyone who would listen. Just a year ago, he had been savoring a simpler life, sea salt on his lips and dreams of future with his childhood sweetheart Abigail. But the inevitable call to arms had changed everything. He and his brothers in arms now stood on the precipice of history, engulfed in the maelstrom of war, tasked with liberating Europe from the ruthless grip of Nazi oppression. As the first GIs flooded the shores of Normandy, John's thoughts drifted back to those sweet days by the beach. The sound of laughter mingled with the surf. For him, the ocean had always represented freedom. Now the space between breath and the next impending blast of gunfire appeared impossibly vast. He shook his head as if to dispel the fears that threatened to overwhelm him. They were here now. They had trained for this moment. He could not let doubt erode the courage he had summoned to step into this war. The primary objective of his unit was to capture the strategic town of Carentan. In the broader canvas of the Allied invasion plan, Carentan was not merely a tactical point on a map. It was a vital link between the beachhead at Utah and the next phase of the invasion at Omaha. If the Allies hoped to solidify their position in Europe, they needed to control Carentan, pulling together a thread of momentum that could unravel the Nazi grip across the continent. "Sergeant Sullivan," a voice called out, snapping him back into the urgency of the moment. It was Corporal Frank Wilkins, his wiry frame hunched low against the wall, his blue eyes wide with a mix of fear and adrenaline. "We can't stay here. We need to move up and secure the exit to the main road. We're sitting ducks." John nodded, chest tightening as he made eye contact with Frank. The two had grown close during their training, leaning on one another for strength in the endless drills and fatigue. Frank was like family, a younger brother from a different life. Both men shared the same fierce longing for home. Yet here they were, shoulder to shoulder in the firestorm. "On three, then. We move," John directed, counting off. 1, 2, 3. With a breathless rush, they sprinted across the open ground. The dirt kicked up around them as they zigzagged, clinging to patches of ruin for cover. Metal crunched underfoot as they navigated the remnants of a world torn asunder by war. Each footfall echoed the memories of the boys who had come before them, sacrificed along this cursed path. Halting behind a cluster of debris, John peered around the corner to survey the scene. Just beyond lay the remnants of a once bustling village, now reduced to shattered dreams and splintered wood. German soldiers took cover behind barricades, their positions fortified but vulnerable. The air was electric with tension, punctuated only by the crack of gunfire. A bullet whizzed past John's ear, and he ducked back, heart racing, adrenaline surging like wildfire through his veins. A loud explosion rippled through the air, followed by the deep shudder of the earth beneath him. It was as if time had compressed into a singular moment of blinding clarity. John understood life and death with devastating certainty. This was where valor was born, in the face of overwhelming odds. The landscape ahead was a graveyard of steel and dust, but also one where hope gleamed under the ferocity of gunfire. "Let's secure the buildings to our right," Frank urged, pointing to the crumbling structure that could offer their unit a tactical advantage. The sergeant nodded, drawing a breath to steel himself. "Cover me," he commanded, his voice steadier than he felt. "Always," Frank replied, fearlessly lifting his rifle and aiming toward the enemy, heart racing with the shared knowledge that in the chaos, each of them was responsible for the other's life. With swift movements, John dashed from cover to the building, the splintered doorway granting momentary refuge. Inside, he paused, scanning the narrowing alleyways that would lead to the Germans. The air smelled of gunpowder mixed with the sharp scent of sweat and metal. It was unmistakably a place where men fought for their lives. He motioned for Frank to follow. The two slid seamlessly into combat mode, traversing through the thick shadows. A shatter of glass startled John. Instinct kicked in and he dropped to a crouch. Frank grabbed his arm, eyes wide, urging him to remain still. The hustle of boots and then laughter echoed from the next room, sending a chilling wave of emotions resonating through John. The insignificance of his courage, the audacity of men laughing now in the abyss of war, sent pangs of anger coursing through him. They did not know the sacrifice it took to reach this moment. Deciding he had no time for fear, John took the lead, his rifle raised. He burst into the next room where a group of unsuspecting German soldiers huddled together, their discourse cut short by the surprise of an incoming American sergeant. The look of shock was instantaneous, a flash of confusion before shooting erupted in a violent exchange of bullets. The air filled with the sickening sounds of bullets tearing flesh and the echoes of lives lost in the blink of an eye. Amidst the chaos, John felt time stretching, the noise dulling to a distant roar. It was just him and the task at hand. He darted forward, feeling the surge of adrenaline overpower fear, pulling from an inner well of courage previously unknown to him. One soldier turned, eyes wide with terror. It was almost pitiful to John, as if time had stepped back, revealing their shared humanity, but there was no room for mercy in war. John squeezed the trigger, and the man fell. With each breath, fury honed John's resolve. Despite the danger closing in around them, he fought as if every heartbeat counted. He and Frank moved like clockwork, their instincts heightened, supporting one another through every explosion of sound and screams that echoed the horrors of war. They cleared room after room, sweeping the ruins until they reached the last doorway that would lead them back into the streets of Carentan. Outside, the battle raged on like a tempest unleashed, teeming with life and death, the air thick with gunpowder and desperation. Bodies lay strewn like discarded toys, each one a reminder that beneath the valor and gallantry of battle, mortality weighed heavy on every man's heart. "John, we're losing men," Frank shouted, his voice barely piercing through the cacophony. Panic licked at the edges of his courage, and it was all too palpable. "I know, just hold on," John yelled back, striving to mask his own uncertainty. If his voice wavered, it could crack the fragile resolve built in the previous moments. Suddenly, chaos erupted as an explosion rang powerful against the walls of the buildings nearby, tossing John and Frank to the ground. For a heartbeat, the world spun sideways. When the dust settled, John looked up to see Frank's brawny form limp on the ground beside him, blood streaming from a wound in his side, his breathing shallow. "Frank," John hollered, scrambling to his friend, urgency spiking through him like an electric shock. He knelt beside him, applying pressure to the wound. "Stay with me, buddy. I need you to hold on." But Frank was slipping. Life was ebbing from his grasp like sand trickling through fingers. "John, I'm Frank," gasped, each word a challenge. They both understood there was no comforting promise to make. The battlefield was ruthless. John felt a deep chill wrap around him, an unfathomable cold in the very depths of his being. This was the moment, the heavy toll that every man now had to bear. "No, no, you can't leave me, not like this," John cried, emotions surging to the surface, tearing apart the bond they had forged under the weight of shared experiences, laughter, loss, hope. The dreams for a life beyond war were consumed by the dark fog that encroached upon them. A distant voice interrupted, a call for a medic, the urgent clamor of other soldiers rushing to the scene. John kept his gaze locked on Frank. "You're going to make it. I won't let you go." Each word felt like a lifeline, but even he could not deny the inevitable truth pressing upon him. This was war. With Frank's last breath, his eyes glazed over, and he was gone. John cradled his friend's lifeless body, guilt and anguish coursing through him like a raging river. In a world of chaos, where men were pawns on the battlefield, he had lost his knight. A deep wound formed within him, the kind of wound that cuts deeper than flesh, leaving scars that haunted the soul. As John stood, the heart of battle continued to rage, his mind now a storm of confusion and anger. He could still hear the echo of Frank's laughter as they had shared stories under the sun, holding dreams as fragile as glass. But now, whatever glimmer of hope had existed in that camaraderie was stained with the blood of friendship. More men kept falling. The price of this war was steep, but he would not let Frank's sacrifice be in vain. The battle for Carentan became a surreal blur, each moment marked by the faces of fallen soldiers, their stories dissolving amidst a cacophony of cannon fire and desperate pleading. It became evident that victory was not simply a matter of strategy, it was measured in the blood of brothers, the price weighted against the scales of humanity. In the following hours, John doubted his own sanity. He fought with the fury of a soul burdened by loss, pressing forward as each man fell, as if their sacrifice demanded it. Gunfire and explosions danced around him like shadows, urging him onward. He lunged across the battlefield, charging through the chaos with a singular purpose, refusing to let despair consume him. As the sun sank low, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, John and the remaining soldiers finally forced the last German troops to retreat. The tide of battle shifted as the Allies regained control of Carentan, but the victory tasted bitter on his lips. The aftermath bore the marks of destruction. Carriages overturned, homes razed to ash, and bodies of men littered the streets. The reality of war settled heavily upon John's heart, and the weight of what they had endured carved heavy lines into his face. They had won a vital strategic point, but at what cost? As he surveyed the devastation, he couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness that lingered in the air like a fog that refused to lift. It was then John spotted a shimmering glint amongst the rubble, reminders of his fallen comrades, letters, photographs, lost dreams. He picked up a torn photograph of Frank, his smile infectious even through the fractured likeness cast by war's torment. Memories flooded back, the laughter, the bittersweet conversations. The impending heaviness swelled in John's chest, a profound aching that gnawed at him. With night draping its heavy cloth over the land, he fell to his knees, heart racked with grief as he thought of Abigail waiting back home, unaware of the horrors he had faced. Tears blurred his vision, and he gripped the photograph tightly, vowing silently to keep Frank's spirit alive as they moved into the uncertain future. This victory would mean something more than a tactical maneuver. It would be a promise to carry forward the memory of those who had fought and fallen alongside him. Days turned into weeks, and whispers of what had sparked at Carentan echoed through the conversations of soldiers in the camps. Men shared tales of hardships and heroism, each one capturing a piece of the truth that lay within that battlefield. Life continued, each moment shadowed by the memories of loss, yet illuminated by the strength it had forged. The weight endured began to morph into a fuel for John. Fatigue was replaced by an undeniable will to honor his brothers who had not returned. As the ribbons of war continued to twist and knot across the continent, carving paths that changed the course of history, John found his resolve. His courage was no longer about the skirmishes or the blood on his hands, but rather about the bonds created and the stories shared. History would remember Carentan, not just for its strategic importance, but for the souls it demanded in its name. One sunny June morning, about a year after the operation, John returned to that small beach in Cape May. The waves curled close to the shore, whispering promises of hope and renewal, reminiscent of days gone by. He picked up a seashell, glancing out into the horizon, carrying with it the blessings of America's lost sons. "Frank," John murmured softly. The waves lapping at the shore seemed to carry his sentiment. What had once been drowned in sorrow transformed into a pledge, a vow to continue living, to find joy again amidst the echoes of sacrifice. With every wave that kissed the sand, he pledged to honor their legacy by ensuring that their tales were never forgotten. History weighs heavy, but a heart that remembers carries the burden beautifully. In his heart, John Sullivan knew that though the scars of war remained, there was always a glimmer of hope, a promise kept within every life touched by the storm of sacrifice. He would find solace in his memories, and as he turned back toward the shore, he carried with him the manners of a hero. He would walk forward into the light, a testament that even in darkness, the human spirit remains relentless, unwavering, and eternally brave.